What's up everyone, welcome back to another episode of AWS tutorial. And today I'll show you how to auto-scale and load balance a Node.js app that's hosted on EC2 instances. And we call this collection of EC2 instances a target group because they have the same code, running the same application, and serve the same content for the request. So auto-scaling with the combination of load balancing is a very common practice or strategy that people use in the real world to have a reliable system. For example, if you have a shopping website and you're hosting your API on an EC2 instance, during normal time, 2 EC2 instances may be enough to handle all the traffic. But when Black Friday or Cyber Monday comes, your traffic is going to be significantly higher. And when that happens, the auto-scaling group is going to automatically spin up another EC2 instances that has the same API code and running the same application and serve the same content. And the load balancer is going to evenly distribute all the load across all the instances. So this way you don't have to do anything, you can just sit back and relax because the auto-scaling group is going to scale your system in and out depending on the traffic. So in this tutorial, we're going to build everything from scratch, step by step. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so step 1 of the process is to write the code for our simple Node.js application. And we're going to save the code in GitHub so that the EC2 instances can download the code from there. So I'm going to create a new repo for that. So I'm going to hit new. I'll just call it auto scaling Node.js app. Keep it public. Add readme, add a git ignore, and we're going to choose Node. Create. Alright, so it's done. And now we're going to clone this repo to our local machine so we can write the code for it. So I'm going to open VS Code and then have that open a empty folder called tutorial. And then I'll go to terminal, new terminal. And I'm just going to do git clone, paste the URL. Alright, and then I'm going to cd into this project. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a package.json file to define our project. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to have a name attribute. We'll just call it the same name as the GitHub repo. And then we're going to have a version. Let's call it 1.0.0. Author. Let's go Felix Yu. And then dependencies. We're only going to use one library called Express to define our API. And I think that's the latest version. And then we're going to create another file called app.js. That's our API code. And first thing first, we're going to define or import Express. And then we're going to define app as a Express app. And then a constant called port. And we're going to host it on 3000. We're only going to have one route, which is the home page, and it's a get method. But obviously you're going to define your specific API routes. We're going to have a request and response, and we're going to send some simple HTML. We're going to have a h1 tag that says auto scaling demo app. Close it. And then we're going to have a h4 tag that says message success. And then let's have a paragraph that specifies the version as well. 0.0. Okay. And now we're going to have the app listen to the port number that we defined. And we're just going to log out a simple message that says demo app is up and listening to port. And then specify the port number. Alright, so that is it. And now let's test it locally before we do anything on the AWS console. So do npm install. That will install the libraries. It's done. And then I do node app.js. All right, so let's go to that port. So localhost 3000. All right, seems like it's working. All right, so since the app is working, so now let's go back to VS Code and push the code to GitHub. Control C, git add, git commit, git push. All right, so it's done. And now let's go to the AWS console and set up the system. Alright, so right now I'm on the home page of the AWS console, and we're going to do everything under the EC2 page. So I'm going to go there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a security group for the EC2 instances to use. So I'm going to scroll down on the side panel under network and security. I'm going to click on security groups, create, give it a name. I'll just call it auto scaling security group. I'm just going to use the default VPC, and then we're going to add some rules to it. The first one is SSH, so SSH port 22, and then allow anywhere. Another one is HTTP port 80, anywhere as well, and then HTTPS 443. Anywhere, because we need that to download the code from GitHub. And then lastly, we're gonna have a custom port that is 3000, because remember in our code we are hosting our app in port 3000, and that allows anywhere as well. Hit create. Description, let's give it the same, create. Alright, so it's done. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a launch template. So a launch template is pretty similar to a launch configuration, except it's newer and it's recommended by AWS. So I'm going to use that. So on the side panel, under instances, I'll click on launch templates. I'll hit create. So a launch template is basically a blueprint for the auto scaling group to use. It tells it what type of OS to use, what image to use for the EC2 instances, and then what code to download and what to run and stuff like that. So I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it auto scaling templates. And then click here. For the image, we're going to use the Linux 2 Amazon image. And then instance type, we're going to choose T2 micro because it's free. And then key pair. I already have one, so I'm going to choose the one that I have. But if you don't have one, you can just click here to create a new one, just in case you want to SSH into your instance for any reason. And then I'll choose VPC. And then for the security group, we're going to select the one that we just created. I believe it's that one. And then scroll all the way down under advanced details. And then scroll all the way down under user data. So this is the command that the EC2 is going to run after they get spun up. And we're going to specify the command for downloading the code from our GitHub repository and then run a command to start it. So I already have this written out before, so I'm just going to copy and paste it. But I'm going to go over that line by line just to tell you what it is. So this line over here just to tell the auto scaling group to put all the logs in here in this file. So this is easier to debug and you can see what the problem is if you run into any. And then this line is to download the NVM from the website. And at the time of recording, I believe that is the latest version. And then right here, we are sourcing the NVM to make it active. And then we're going to use the NVM to install Node. And then we're going to export the home directory for NVM. And then we're going to do a yam update right here. And then we're going to use yam to download Git so that we can download the code from GitHub. And then we're going to cd into the EC2 user directory. And then we're going to use Git to download the code from our GitHub. And obviously, you're going to change this to your own repository link. And in here as well, you're going to change that to your project name. So we're going to cd into the project name and then give it permission to execute things. And then we're going to do npm install to install the module. And then we're going to run this line to start the project or to start the application. So if we just do node app.js, it's running in the foreground, and then we don't want that to happen. We want it to run on the background. and we're gonna save the logs in these log files. So I'm just gonna copy this and then go back to the console, paste it here. Everything looks good, and then create launch templates. Alright, so it's done. So let's go back to the EC2 instances. Alright, so the next step is to create an auto-scaling group. So I'm going to scroll down on the side panel, auto-scaling groups, create, name, I'll just call it Node.js App auto-scaling group. And then we're going to select the template that we just created. We're going to choose the latest version, just in case we change it, we don't have to modify it here. Hit next. For network, we're going to choose the default VPC, where we create our security group in, and then subnet, I'll just choose the first three. Hit next. Load balancer, we're going to create a new balancer, and we're going to choose application load balancer. You can change the name to whatever you want, I just keep it as is. And then we're going to choose internet facing, because we're going to access it directly just for testing purposes. And then for the port number, we're going to change that to 3000 because we're hosting our app in port 3000. And then we're going to create a new target group. And again, you can change it to whatever you want. And then hit next. Desired capacity. I just choose two instances. Max capacity, I'll choose 3. Scaling policy, we're going to define a scaling policy, and we're going to use the average CPU. So normally 50 is a good number, but for testing purposes, I'm going to change it to, let's say, 20. So what it means is that whenever the average CPU utilization across different EC2 instances is above 20%, it's going to scale out to create an additional one. And then hit next, next, next. Everything looks good. Let's hit create. Alright, so it's created. And now if we go back to the EC2 dashboard, we should be able to see 2 EC2 instances that are being spin up. And there you go. One is running and then the other one is pending. I think this is going to take a few minutes, because after it spins up the EC2 instances, it has to go through all these commands to download things and run the app. So I'm going to pause the video and then come back in about 5 minutes. Alright, so it's been 5 minutes. I think both of the instances should finish the downloading and all that stuff and up and running now. So if I click on the first one, copy the IP address, and then do 3000. Alright, so it's up and running. And then do the same thing for the second instance. It's also running, and they have the same content, so that is good. And now if we go to the load balancer on the side panel, under load balancing, if we just copy the DNS name, paste it here, we also see the same content here. But the problem is we don't want to specify a port number. We want to just be able to type in a URL and it's going to show you the content, but it's not doing that now. So let's fix that. So go back to the AWS console, go to listeners, and then check this, add it, and then change the port number to be 80. Hit update, and then go back. And then go back to the URL. Hit refresh, and hey, there you go. Now it's able to get it directly. And now let's go back to the EC2 instances. And then if I terminate one of them, let's say the second one. And now if I go back here, hit refresh, and it's gonna take a few seconds. Alright, it's hanging now because it's terminated, and it's gonna time out. And this one is still working. And now if I go back to the load balancer URL, hit refresh, it's still working properly because all the traffics are routing to the first instance. And now, okay, finally it timed out. And this one's still working. And that is still working as well. which is good. That means it's working. And now if we go back here, within a minute, it should be able to automatically spin up a new instance because we set the desired instance and the minimum number of instances to be 2. It may take a minute though, so I'm going to pause the video and then come back. Okay, so it's been a minute and we see that we have 2 instances spin up now because we just terminated one and then the auto scaling group just created a new one for us. And if I copy the IP address for the new instance, I should see the same content. And yep. And if I go back here, it's still working properly. And now let's SSH into one of the instances and then blow up the CPU so that the auto scaling group is gonna create a third one for us. So let's choose that one. So copy the IP address, open a terminal, and then do SSH-I, and then the path to the key pair. And then do EC2 user add the IP address, hit yes. And now we're going to create a shell script. Press I for insert, and then we're going to do just a while loop. And then we're going to do just echo something like blowing up the server, and then do numbers n, and then n plus 1, and then do done. Add a space. Alright, hit escape, :WQ to save it, and then we're going to do chmod 755 to allow it to execute, and then do this. So it's basically printing out words indefinitely until you stop it. So if we go back here and then hit monitoring, we should be able to see the CPU usage. And since we don't have detailed monitoring, enable is going to be 1 data point per 5 minutes. So I'm going to pause the video and then come back. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes. And as you can see, the CPU usage for this instance is 62%. That means the average CPU usage is above 30%, which is higher than the limit that we set to spin up a third one. So if I do a refresh on here, I should see a third one being spin up. Alright, it's running. If I close this, I should see one is pending and now it's running. So if I go back here and do this again, I should see 3 of them. And now 3 of them are running. And one other thing that I want to mention is under target group, we only have 1 target group. And you may see that the number of healthy instances is 0 and unhealthy is 2. And that's because the port number that we set for the health check is incorrect. So if I do edit health check events, if we change that to 3000, it's gonna check the 3000 port and say that they're healthy now. It's gonna take maybe 2 minutes for that to change. And last but not least, you need to tear down your infrastructure, otherwise you're going to be charged money. And you cannot just terminate instances in here through the console because the auto scaling group is going to spin it up again if you terminate that. So you have to go to auto scaling group and then delete the auto scaling group. And then you can also delete the load balancer and the target group as well, so that you won't be charged any money. And after you did all that, your instances should be terminated automatically within a minute. And this is it, everyone. I hope you have learned something. And if you like this video, I hope you can give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video.